Hey, I wanted to talk a little about why I care about fasting, or why I care about it, and how I've gotten to the point in my life where I eat carnivore and fast regularly, um, or that I'm at least experimenting with fasting. Because obviously we all have our own stories, we all have our own health journeys. Some of us more focused on health than others, mostly by necessity, because things come up like autoimmune disorders or whatever. I've never really had to deal with that kind of a thing, but 10 years ago, I did have a surprise that thrust me onto a very different path, or into a very different relationship with food than I had ever had, that was much more high maintenance than I had ever had. And it was kind of a bummer, but since then I've been, kind of on this path of experimenting and trying to figure out what works best with my body, what's truly healthy. And so I was just going to talk a little bit about that, give you background so you can understand where I'm coming from and why I care about what I do and why I do what I do. Growing up, my relationship with food is fairly normal and healthy. As far as I know, the only issue I ever had was dairy. I was lactose intolerant, and so while I knew I was lactose intolerant and I was pretty much constantly bloated because I just didn't care, and I would still eat ice cream and cheese and cream cheese because it's delicious. That was really the only food sensitivity I ever had, and I was essentially fine with being bloated and farty all the time because it was worth it. Dairy is delicious. But when I was 22, one night I just had this excruciating pain that lasted for hours and hours and hours, and at some point I called one of my family members and they took me to the hospital because at that point I had called a nurse's hotline. They thought it was probably appendicitis. So I went to the hospital thinking I was gonna get my appendix out. Well, they did find something in my intestine, and it was the size of a softball. They had no idea what it was, so they went in, pulled it out, and what it ended up being was the result of a birth defect called a Meckel's diverticulum, which essentially is a part of your intestine that at birth, it's essentially a dead end of intestine, and 2% of people get them. Typically, the people who get them, they're caught before they turn 2 years old. So it doesn't usually cause issues over the course of these people's lives. Well, for some reason, mine was not caught until I was 22 years old. And what had happened, as far as we can tell, was that over the course of my life, food had been getting caught in this weird little dead end of intestine for a long time, and it had caused issues, but we didn't really realize that was the cause of the issues I was having. So when I was very young, I had a really weird overnight episode of pain in my stomach, and we thought it was appendicitis. I did end up going to the hospital. They didn't see anything wrong with my appendix, so they thought it was probably an ovarian cyst because it was showing very similar symptoms to an ovarian cyst. And when they went in with an ultrasound, they did see some sort of mass there, thought it was an ovarian cyst. The next day I went in, drank that terrible fruit juice or fruit whatever for the scan thing, and they went in and it was gone, magically gone. And so when we found out I had this weird intestine thing, that answered that question from probably 10 years prior, that, oh, I've had this thing sitting inside me that's been accumulating and expanding and shrinking and expanding and shrinking with, food passing through it, and it's probably caused a lot of issues with food sitting in it and rotting for long periods of time. Anyway, so point being, that was taken out of my intestine, and along with a large portion of my bowel as well. So from then on, I was left with a significantly shorter bowel and scar tissue in my intestine. And so after that surgery, which was totally an emergency, totally unexpected, obviously, the week following, I went back to my normal diet, which at the time was fairly balanced and healthy. I was eating lean meats, a lot of vegetables. I loved vegetables. I would just literally hold a bag of spinach while watching a movie or something, and I would just be eating raw spinach out of the bag. That was like my popcorn. Like, I love vegetables. And that's actually what I was doing the night that, probably 2 weeks after my surgery, my doctor had told me that I could go back to eating my normal diet because it was very, very healthy and balanced. Well, surprise, surprise, I can't eat fiber anymore. I was sitting on the couch, I was eating raw spinach because it's delicious, and I started feeling a pain in my stomach again that was very familiar because, 3 weeks prior, I had this very traumatizing night that ended in an emergency surgery. So I ended up back in the hospital with another blockage in my intestine because fiber is not my friend now. I have a shorter intestine. I have scar tissue with staples mangled up in it. And so, fiber is very likely going to cause blockages. So I went on a liquid diet for a really long time. I did a lot of raw juices, fruit and vegetable juices, mainly vegetable juices because I don't love the amount of sugar in fruit juices. So for a very long time I was doing liquids. After that, I was really scared to eat fiber, so I went on just like a high processed food diet, which was very weird for me and terrible. I was literally eating cookies all the time, like low sugar cookies. And because they're super, super processed, and my body would pass them no problem. So I was eating like raw vegetable juices and cookies, highly processed cookies, anything highly processed that I knew my body could pass without too much issue. Well, that was super unhealthy, but I got through it and my body passed all of it and it was fine. As I went on in life, I did slowly transition back into vegetables because I really do want to feel good. Like, I want to do the best I can with the information I have at any given moment, and all of the information I had at the time was health experts saying, eat fiber. It's very good for you. The minerals that you get in vegetables and fruits are super necessary, and you're only going to get them in fruits and vegetables. And so that's really what I was trying to do. I loved fruits and vegetables. So I did go plant-based for a very long time. Occasionally I would eat fish and chicken, but largely I was doing all fruits and vegetables. I did a lot of soy protein. Oh gosh, I haven't done it for so long. I forget all the stuff I ate, but I did do a lot of soy protein. And I was constantly bloated. I still experienced digestive pain very regularly. All of those things were just really hard to combat. But I really just wanted to be healthy and get the nutrients that I needed. I had a lot of weird episodes where I worked out a lot, but I never felt like I really had any muscle gains. Hang on, my heater is about to turn on and it's very loud. I'm gonna catch it. Muscle gains. I never really felt like I got a ton of improvement in my muscle performance, and so that was kind of always gnawing at me. Primarily what my issues were that I had these really terrible dizzy spells very constantly. Dizzy to the point where I would feel like I needed to pull the car over. Sometimes my vision would start tunneling, when you get kind of the black at the edges and it just goes down to nothing for a few seconds. Very scary. And so, yeah, I got black tunnel visioning. I constantly had heart palpitations. What else did I have that was an issue? All the kind of normal things. I was low energy. My skin was terrible. I had the worst acne. It was awful. And I overcompensated with makeup, which was awful and not helpful. I mean, it did hide it, but it was awful. Anyway, there's just a lot of issues. And I do now think that some of that was associated with the plant-based diet that I was eating because of the inflammatory issues with plants. But anyway, I'll get to that eventually. so I was eating plant-based. I had a lot of health issues. Nothing was really noticeable or terrible to anyone outside, and I didn't feel like I was oppressed by it. It was fairly normal for me post-surgery. I was just constantly experimenting with what was good for me. I was making my own kombucha for a couple of years, and I loved doing that, but again, it was just something along my journey of like trying to reintroduce like new good beneficial bacteria to my gut so that I could potentially digest a little better and maybe retain some supplements or some nutrients a little bit better, because I do have a shorter bowel, so I'm going to be absorbing. I have less space to absorb what I need to from my food. I do think my body's overcompensated for that, but I don't really know how that works. So I definitely feel like with the supplements that I had been taking, I definitely wasn't absorbing what I needed to. And so yeah, at some point I realized, well, okay, I'm eating plant-based. I'm not getting enough of things like iron and things like that. So I started getting very into supplements, and I ended up, I mean, I still have my supplements that I've stopped taking for a really long time, but I could show you my cupboard. I was taking unbelievable amounts of supplements, so many supplements every day. And I mean, I think I kind of needed to, because I just wasn't getting the nutrients I needed from a plant-based diet. I was taking plant-based protein shakes a lot. I had a plant-based protein shake or 2, sometimes 3, every day, because I was trying to eat high protein. It was pretty hard to eat high protein. And when I was doing the shakes, a lot of them just make me poop myself or fart and bloated constantly. Like, it's just, there is a very inflammatory, what's the word I keep looking for? Characteristic of eating plant-based, at least for me. So, anyway, so let's fast forward a little bit. I ate plant-based for years. I incorporated things like kombucha, a ton of supplementation, which I really needed to do. And I started doing better with the iron that I needed to do. At some point I discovered that a lot of my like heart palpitation, I had a little eye twitch, the dizzy spells, I realized that I was not getting enough potassium. And I didn't know how crucial potassium is to energy levels, muscle function, like pretty much everything in your body. I really didn't know that, and I thought I was eating plant-based, so of course I'm going to get enough like potassium from vegetables. No, man. If you're looking at how much potassium you actually need in a day, I should have pulled up some stats for this. You should be getting, at least for me, I shoot for 4,700 milligrams of potassium every day, and that is, I do think everyone should probably start with that. I'd say start with at least 4,000 milligrams. And I guarantee you, even if you're eating plant-based, you are not getting 4,000 milligrams of potassium every day. Let's see, in 1 cup of spinach, potassium. In a cup of spinach, which I was eating, I don't know, 48 cups of spinach a day. I love spinach. I was 167 milligrams. 167 milligrams. In my head, I thought I was getting like 500 milligrams of potassium in a cup of spinach. Well, that's obviously not happening. So, if you're eating a whole package, like a 10-ounce package of spinach, which, my friends, is a lot of spinach, you'd be getting 1,500 milligrams of potassium. If you're trying to get 4,500 milligrams of potassium in your diet every day, you're not going to get it just from food, unfortunately. But listen to this. In 8 ounces of beef, you're getting 720 milligrams of potassium. Shocker. I really thought for years and years and years that all the minerals I needed were in vegetables. Well, somebody was teaching me wrong, because 720 milligrams in 8 ounces of beef is, well, great. So, I won't skip there yet. clearly I'm carnivore now, so we'll get to that eventually. But rewinding to when I was still in my supplementation phase, I realized that a lot of the issues I was experiencing were due to a low potassium. And so I started supplementing every day, way before I started carnivore, with no salt. I measure it out very carefully. It's a quarter teaspoon is, I think, 690 milligrams of potassium. And I just spoon, usually 1 or 2 quarter teaspoons of potassium, which no salt is just pure potassium, into my giant water bottle a couple times a day. And I track it very carefully, so I don't ever go over 4,700 milligrams of potassium, because that would be a lot of potassium if I went over that. But I try to stay between 4,000 and 4,700 milligrams of potassium. I just put it in my water. I track what I'm eating. Like if I'm eating a pound of beef, if I'm eating 2 pounds of beef a day, I just track it. So like this, 8 ounces, 720. For every pound of beef I get, I'm eating about 1,400 milligrams of potassium. So then I'll take 1,400 milligrams less of potassium in my water. But really that's the only thing I supplement with anymore. But when I was eating plants, I was supplementing iron, potassium, vitamin D, vitamin B. The list literally goes on forever. I could show you. It's not just 4 vitamins. It was probably 7 to 10 vitamins or more sometimes. Calcium, like just all this stuff. So, about 2 years ago, I went on a road trip with my boyfriend, and he had convinced me to try red meat. And for me, I was eating plant-based primarily for health reasons. I wanted to be healthy. But there was an instance when I was in my late teens where my family, for Easter every year, we eat lamb. And I guess it wasn't in my late teens, it was in my early 20s, I had just gotten a dog. And we sat down for our like Easter dinner, and I was cutting into this like leg of lamb or something, and I just I couldn't do it because I felt like I was eating my dog. All of a sudden I had a relationship with this meat, and I couldn't do it. So ever since then, I had totally cut out red meat. Very occasionally I would taste things here and there, but I chose to stop liking it at that point because I couldn't handle the animal aspect. So yes, it was a little bit moral. It wasn't because I wanted to be a good person necessarily. It was just because I didn't like eating my friends. I apologize, I'm plugging my headphones in because I realized my roommate's dog is going crazy outside, and it's probably catching on the camera, so hopefully this will help a little bit. But anyway, so there was an instance in my early 20s where I decided to stop eating red meat, and ever since then I had eaten chicken and fish. Like I said, fish I never had any issues with. Chicken I had a little bit of issues with because I watched a documentary and it was awful because the poor chickens. So I had some moral issues with eating meat. And so when he suggested that because he knew about my dizzy spells and he was very worried about it, because it's worrisome. And so he was like, you are eating high protein, plant-based protein, but it's clearly not working for you. Why don't you just try a little bit of red meat? And so I did. I started incorporating small portions of red meat, and shocker, I realized I loved it. I had kind of told myself I didn't like it before that because I couldn't handle the relationship with animals part. But also, I experienced a lot of health benefits. Even with just adding a little bit of red meat to my diet, I just realized I had significantly more energy. I track my macros, and so at the time I realized the macros that were in beef, and it was so nutrient dense. I was shocked with how it affected the supplements that I needed. And so as I added more red meat to my diet, I started supplementing a little bit less, And I started having better energy. I stopped having dizzy spells. I could work out a little bit harder. Like there were like small benefits that started building up, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And then at some point, I remember I started looking into ancestral eating. I started looking into my ancestry specifically. My ancestry is like 99% from Sweden. Very, very like Northern European specifically, but most of my DNA is targeted right at Sweden. So I started looking at kind of the ancestry around the Swedish people and like the Sami people. And I mean, realistically, ancestrally in that part of the world, we primarily just ate reindeer. So it was a highly like 99% red meat. And fish in the summer when you can, when you're fishing, or even in the winter when you're ice fishing. But there is primarily red meat, occasionally fish, and very, very, very limited plants. And reindeer don't actually make enough milk to produce cheese for humans. Most of their milk has to go to their babies, or almost all of their milk has to go to babies. That's why reindeer dairy is very, very rare. And so reindeer don't produce a ton of milk, so those people also did not digest milk, which made a ton of sense about how my body functions. And so I just started reading a lot more about that. I started realizing that I was eating a very, very high fiber diet, which was causing my particular gut a ton of issues, and I already knew that, but I didn't know how to cure it and stay healthy, because I knew I needed to eat vegetables to be healthy, or so I thought. And so I was just doing a ton of research on ancestral eating. I was researching a lot about carnivore. Dr. Ken Berry was a huge, huge resource for me in trying to figure out what was true in the health sphere, and specifically from educated doctors who have looked at and understand studies and the results of studies, why we're recommended to eat fiber, which doesn't really make sense. Why we're recommended to eat the foods that we are. I started looking into the recommended foods that we've been recommended our whole lives by the whatever the FDA, whatever we're taught in schools, which is like so unbelievably unhealthy. I don't understand why any of us or our parents ever believed it and like pushed it on us. I started researching a lot about the food industries and why it's shaped the way it is, why certain foods are cheaper or more expensive or pushed on the shelf, how the food industry makes money. And most of that research pushed me towards, that research plus the research of nutrient-dense foods, trying to find what is the most nutrient-dense thing for me. And then when I was trying to look for low-fiber solutions to a low-fiber, high-nutrient diet, carnivore seemed to be the kind of only option. And so there were a few people that I researched a lot. Dr. Ken Berry was a major resource. Meckel Peterson was an inspiration as well. You can look all of these people up. Meckel Peterson is a great resource for anecdotal carnivore, anecdotal, whatever you call it. I don't know, podcasts or whatever. She just has a lot of people sharing anecdotal evidence on the benefits of carnivore diet. And what the diet she leans on specifically is 100% beef. And I think most of the people she talks to are 100% beef, but she does talk to a lot of carnivores who also incorporate things like eggs and dairy. And so those are both very good resources. Specifically, Dr. Ken Berry is very thorough and educational, and he does address a lot of the things that we were taught most of our lives and debunks a lot of those lies with research evidence. Just great resources. I'll link them because I super believe in them. And so as I was, researching all that stuff, and then it all just kind of lined up. Those people's research, my ancestral eating and thinking, well, my body is probably made for this kind of a thing. The benefits that I experienced with only introducing small amounts of red meat, and then realizing that I was eating a very high fiber diet with a body that doesn't process fiber very well. And carnivore is a zero carb or zero fiber diet. So I was like, okay, I do need to try this. All of these things are pointing to yes. And so one day I pulled the trigger. All my friends were over here and I opened my cupboards and I just said, take everything that's not plant-based. I'm going to start carnivore tomorrow. I need all of this stuff out of my house. And so my friends just took bags and bags and bags, cleared out all of my cupboards of everything that wasn't plant-based or everything that wasn't animal-based. And I was going hard beef because I really thought that that was going to be the route for me. And so they essentially took everything. And the next day I went out, I bought like pounds and pounds and pounds of beef and just started experimenting of how to cook it. I'm super scared of cooking meat. I hated cooking chicken, and that was like chicken and fish were like the only things I would cook, and I didn't enjoy it because meat scared me. And so I also went out, I treated myself because I do love a good smoked brisket. So I went to a butcher, I got a giant smoked brisket, cut it in 2 pieces, and then I experimented with smoking brisket because I knew that was going to motivate me. If I could really like nail a smoked brisket, I would be I would be okay to be a carnivore for the rest of my life. And so I just pulled the trigger and went carnivore. And within the first week of eating only beef, that's a lie. The first week, what I did was I was eating only beef, and I had beef tallow as well to like cook everything in. So I was eating beef tallow, all grass fed if I could. At some point I like ran out of money and had to go not grass fed, but it was better than nothing. So I was shooting for grass fed at first. And then I had wild blueberries that I loved. They're just like frozen. I get them at Walmart. I always have them in the freezer. So I was having 1 cup of wild blueberries every day that first week. Mostly because I still wanted something sweet. I wanted a treat. I love fruit. And so I was allowing myself 1 cup of blueberries because that's about 20 grams of carbs. And so I knew my body was going to be transitioning into ketosis since I was going to be eating a no carb diet. And that might have been hard for me. And so I was transitioning with only 20 grams of carbs every day through the blueberries. Anyway, so I started eating beef, and everybody talks about when you start doing either keto or carnivore that first week is like so miserable. You get keto flu, you have diarrhea, like all of these things happen to you, which I'm sure is very, very true for most people. But for me, within that first week, I never got keto flu. I slept, I think, I was really, really tired for probably 2 days. Like I took a lot of naps, which is not characteristic of me. And then all of a sudden I was just good. And this is too much information for you, I'm sure. But in the past 10 years since I lost that section of my bowel, I have never had regular bowel movements. I rarely was constipated, but I constantly had some level of diarrhea, and it just never went away. It was just always an issue. I just constantly had diarrhea and cramping and all these digestive issues. Well, that first week, I think it was day 3, I had probably the first normal poop of my life in the past 10 years. And and then it was just consistent from then. I just had normal bowel movements. And I was like, what the heck is happening? I was prepared for like violent diarrhea like everybody's talking about and getting like nauseous and sick and all of this stuff. And I'm just good. Like my energy is amazing. I work out every day. And so I was like running, and like all of a sudden, I think I was running like 2 miles a day. And all of a sudden, like I was like at the end of my 2 miles, and I couldn't stop because I was just like, I have way too much energy. I can't do this. So I doubled in a day. I was running 4 miles. I don't recommend that. But point being, I just had like tons of energy, like couldn't run out of energy. My bowel movements regulated super quickly. There's just like all the good stuff happened. And so I just like immediately was like sold. I am sold. And I don't know if it's for everyone. I don't know if I believe if anything is for everyone. I think every body is very, very different. I know my body was desperately waiting for me to switch to that kind of a diet. Like, clearly, obviously, it needed something in that. Whether it was because it's low fiber and I just can't process fiber anymore, or because it was very high protein, or all, I don't know. But what I do know is that meat is very, very, very protein dense. And as I track my macros, I don't track them anymore because I don't need to, because I eat essentially one ingredient. But when I was tracking my macros at the beginning of carnivore, I literally didn't have to supplement. I still supplement potassium and magnesium, but literally I don't take any of my other supplements anymore. I don't need to. I get plenty of iron. I get plenty of vitamin B. All of these things are in meat when they are not in vegetables. So I know meat is highly nutrient dense, so I know I'm getting a lot more nutrients. I don't get dizzy spells anymore. I don't get cramps anymore. I can work out super hard. My brain works a lot faster. I do feel like I can process information a lot better. I just registered for school. I'm so excited. I'm going to go back to school. But it is just like something in my body and my brain just opened up. So yeah, that is why I am carnivore based now. I do go crazy every once in a while. I'm not super strict. I stay pretty strict most of the time. I primarily eat beef. And then I will go through a few weeks at a time where I really love cooking. I really love experimenting with things. So, oopsies, I'm running low on battery, so I'm going to have to cut this off soon. I love experimenting with foods. I love creating new things. So I do love experimenting with like carnivore breads, which is basically just eggs and beef gelatin. So I make things like that. I will go through bouts where I reincorporate specifically eggs and goat dairy, because I love goat dairy, and sometimes I love eggs for some reason. My body just starts craving them, so I will eat them for a little while. But I do notice that my joints get a little bit inflamed when I incorporate eggs. But I usually also incorporate something sweet like monk fruit and coconut cream for a little while, and that's when I really start feeling a little swollen, like bloated, or I start retaining water and my joints start feeling a little bit weird. So I'm pretty sure I can probably blame that on the monk fruit. I think if I was just eating beef, eggs, and the goat dairy, I don't think I would really have any issues, but I'll have to experiment with that. So I've been carnivore for about 8 months now. Yeah, almost exactly 8 months. And like I said, I go up and down with my strictness. I've never been 100% beef all the time. Probably for like 2 or 3 weeks at a time, I'll go 100% beef all the time, and I feel amazing. So I definitely am a proponent of that. But I also really do enjoy variety. So I will go through bouts of carnivore experimentation, and I'll do fun things. I do incorporate liver probably once every 2 weeks. I should do it every week. I do like liver, but I just don't care enough to put the work into the preparation for it, so I don't eat liver as much as I want to, but I do want to incorporate more organ meats because I know they're important and super nutrient dense. Like a liver is literally a multivitamin. It's so good for you, and I feel amazing when I start incorporating liver. So yeah, that is why I have gotten to where I am, why I'm carnivore. And now fasting has become the next step in that, in the health journey, not necessarily the carnivore journey. But it's definitely the next step in figuring out what is good for me. And I know that most of the research I've been doing around fasting is really around healing your body and allowing your cells to clean themselves out and heal. And my hope in that is that I can heal my intestines a little bit more so I can have less food sensitivities. And if I combine the fasting where my body is really getting a deep chance to heal, and when I'm not fasting, I'm eating a very highly nutrient dense, low fiber, diet where my gut is still getting a chance to heal in between, so I'm not getting leaky gut syndrome and things like that, specifically with carnivore. I'm hoping that I can heal enough that like eventually I could potentially reincorporate other foods that won't hurt me like they used to. That's the hope. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but that's the goal. Right now I know that I feel amazing on carnivore. I feel amazing when I'm fasting. So I'm going to stick to that for now, keep experimenting, keep expanding my horizons, and just keep figuring out what's best. Keep intaking information and doing the best I can with the information I have in any given moment. And I encourage you to do the same. So I'll talk to you later.